I don't know. I generally have CNN, MSNBC on mute these days. But you could see over the last 2 weeks, the captions, the hysterical on the brink, World War III,
Yep.
just insanity. Basically, just it was basically, hey, 5 minutes from now, World War III is coming in regards to Russia invading Ukraine. But today, it's like kind of oopsie. I don't know if you saw this. The White House backs away from calling Russian Ukraine invasion imminent.
Yeah.
White House is backing away from its characterization that Russia's invasion into Ukraine is imminent, saying officials, quote, still don't know if Russian President Vladimir Putin has made a decision on incursion. So that's a new one, considering for the last few weeks, all you've heard is it's imminent. And we need to, possibly, send 5 to 10,000 troops there. And even though they're backing away, at the same time, Biden is now sending 3,000 troops to Germany, Poland, and Romania under the guise of strengthening NATO. What are your thoughts on this? Is a very hot and cold war game we've been playing here.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know really where to begin on how pathetic this is, how incorrect, how the propaganda that's being pumped out of our mainstream media. I think one of the main reasons they were forced to back off that statement was because President Zelensky in Ukraine just a couple of days ago said that Russia's not about to invade, and that, yeah, there are Russian troops in Russia on the Ukrainian border, but that's been that way for years now. And he's saying there is no invasion imminent. And he said that kind of against, I mean, it's a pro-US or US backed government in many ways, but he still said, yeah, you need to chill out on the propaganda. So I don't know, this President Zelensky seems to be okay. Maybe it's because he was a comedian before he was elected president just a couple of years ago. So, he's doing comedians proud across the world, but there's so many other factors going on here. There's the fact that the U.S. helped create a coup in the Ukraine in 2014, 2015, working with Nazi forces. You can even read this at Yahoo News. This is not hidden, really, is that the CIA has helped fund and arm these Nazi battalions, the Azov battalion and others. And so we're working with neo-Nazis in Ukraine to put them on the border with Russia. Basically playing a horrific game of let's see if we can cause a nuclear holocaust. And our mainstream media is just, rah, 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 let's go to war. We have had most of our troops out of Afghanistan for a few months now. So I guess it is time to get involved in another full-scale war. It's been a few months. And then you go even deeper, and really a lot of this comes down to oil. It comes down to the fact that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline with Germany, between Russia and Germany, has been completed, and the U.S. wants to do everything to try and stop it because the U.S. sees dollar signs in continuing to supply gas to Europe. And so, and we also want to stop Russia from having pipelines where they could make money by exporting gas and oil. So it on multiple levels, it's very clear that this has nothing to do with, oh my God, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. And then, of course, there's a discussion of NATO. Russia had a promise that NATO wouldn't go beyond a certain point years ago after World War II. And yet the U.S. is slowly collecting NATO countries surrounding Russia. NATO is not a peaceful force. People need to understand that. We seem to think in America, because we fall for the propaganda, that anytime you tack the word NATO on a war, it's a just war or a good war. But the NATO, destruction of Libya, U.S. created, but with NATO, didn't make it any less harmful, any less disgusting, any less of a war crime. Tacking the word NATO on wars doesn't make it right. It's like the Christmas wreath on the pedophile's home. It's just there to make you think everything's nice inside, but it's not.
Well, what's interesting to me, and disclaimer, I'm not working for Russia. I'm not a Putin apologist. I'm not a member of the Kremlin. But you kind of referenced the history here. With the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s, we I mean, there was an explicit promise that the U.S. and NATO would not further move east towards Russia. But I mean, Russia's basically had missiles pointed towards it, like near its borders, for forever. And we all know what happened when we had Cuban missiles, well, actually Russian missiles, fired at us in Cuba under JFK and the whole Cuban missile.
Not fired, but placed in Cuba. Yeah.
Yes, with the whole Cuban Missile Crisis. So, the media, and I'm not defending Putin. He's certainly a sociopath in his own way and has done terrible things to journalists and others. But this idea that like Russia and Putin is the unique threat here, whereas we've basically been knocking on their doorstep for the last several decades, breaching explicit promises not to. I mean, I think most countries would find that threatening if the global superpower and imperialist power, the United States, was using these other countries basically as proxy to further threaten Russia.
Yeah, and I mean, you watch this mainstream media and you would think that Russia's encroaching on all these countries and shit like that. But, people just need to look at the numbers. How many military bases does America have around the world? 900, maybe 1,000 if you count black sites. How many military bases does Russia have outside of Russia? It's roughly 18, and most of those are in the former Soviet bloc countries. So it's 18 compared to 900. And China has 1 outside of China. So the U.S. has decided to be a global military empire and then accuse everyone else of encroaching on other countries, which is laughable. It's the classic propaganda technique of accusing other countries of the thing you're doing. And then you just look at the global deaths caused by U.S. military. The latest numbers on how many the war on terror has killed is 1 million directly. But if you account things like those who have died from infrastructure destruction, etc., we're talking 6 million people killed by our war on terror since 2001. And Russia has bombed how many countries? Russia has killed how many since 2001? I believe it's essentially 0. So it's hilarious to watch all of the mainstream media garbage. And just knowing even the slightest bit about history, and I just mean recent history, you know that what our mainstream media is pushing is laughable.
And by the way, Lockheed Martin, I think it was, recently came out. I don't know if it was their president or somebody that quoted this friction, this tension, this buildup. They're expecting significant boost in revenue because of possible war between Russia and Ukraine.
There should not be a profit motive in killing and death and destruction, but we have a system that is largely based on trying to profit from death and destruction. It's so immoral, so unethical, so disgusting. And they point to those of us who want to make these truths evident and tell people about them as the ones who need to be sidelined, need to be pushed out of mainstream media. Because we want peace and we don't want this death and destruction. But, years ago, there was a time when war profiteering was considered wrong, and now it's considered our standard operating procedure. It's how Wall Street works. I mean, Trump was a disaster, but you look at the few moments where he tried to create peace for his own ego and other garbage reasons. But you look at him trying to create a peace deal with North Korea, and the stocks of the weapons contractors collapsed that day that he announced there'd be peace with North Korea. And sure enough, that creates a lot of force. That creates a whole lot of little people that get involved to make sure that doesn't happen and those stocks go back up. And sure enough, he was stopped from creating peace with North Korea. Like I said, racist, disgusting, horrible, pathetic human being. But in these super small moments where he went against the military-industrial complex, you learn a lot about the system.
Right. And just so the audience knows, this is from In These Times. Top weapons companies boast Ukraine-Russia tensions are a boon for business. Raytheon and Lockheed Martin boasted that the worsening conflict is helping profits. And they're openly telling their investors that tensions between the countries are good for business. And General Dynamics, meanwhile, is boasting about the past returns the company has seen as a result of such disputes. My last question on this, Lee, it's interesting to me because the media, I don't know, like anything with Russia in particular is wall-to-war coverage. They don't seem to have the same zeal that we're still kind of committing this genocide on the Yemenis people, that we're continuing to fuel Saudi Arabia to commit heinous, humanitarian and war crimes on Yemen, not to mention all the other countries we're bombing.
The number of deaths in Afghanistan from our economic war is going to far surpass the number of deaths from our bombing. We have this aggressive, disgusting economic war in Afghanistan right now, and you're right about Yemen as well. And it's just like we're acting like the war is over and we're done talking about it. Meanwhile, we are making sure people starve in Afghanistan as we speak to achieve what? What does that do for us? What does that do for anyone? Who do you think starves when we put these sanctions on? Do you think it's the rich in Afghanistan? Do you think it's the ruling Taliban officials that starve when you put sanctions that crush people? No, it's the poor, it's the elderly, it's the babies. Like literally, we have a policy choice that is killing babies in places like Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, via our economic sanctions. Tens of thousands have died in Venezuela because of our medical sanctions, our economic war on them. And that this is by design. We know it's happening. It's not a mistake. We know it's happening. We know it's how these sanctions work, and we do it anyway. So it is the most immoral human rights abuse campaign you could imagine.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.